This is how I mix vocals. I don't really have a thought process behind mixing vocals. This is just what I do when it comes to mixing vocals. I use the same couple plugins. It works. It sounds good most of the time. I like it, and that's what I do. So this is how I mix vocals. This is going off of the last video that you guys showed a lot of support on in terms of viewage, subscribers, likes. Like, you guys really supported me on the last video, and I appreciate it. And this video is just going over the main vocals. So I went and muted everything, all of the other buses and everything like that is all gone. We're gonna strictly just look at the vocals here. Here we have the main vocal, we have the vocal bus, we have a parallel compressor, a lead all, which this main artist one bus gets into this lead all. Then we have this going into this lead vox, which goes into a mix bus, which goes into the master. This is for the vocal effects, such as like reverb and everything like that, which I'm going to bring back. There we go. And this is gonna have all of the different vocal effects, such as reverb or delay or whatever it may be. But this is it. So I'm gonna go and play the vocal completely raw.
Excuse me if I'm rambling. I'm mentally exhausted, so I resort to drugs and gambling. Suicidal thoughts, I'm borderline if I can't handle it. Demons in my body, I'm comfortable when I channel it. I know it's wrong, like plenty other shit.
So that's the raw vocal. As you can see, over here, it was peaking around like -8, hitting around 12 in that general vicinity. So that's a pretty good start in terms of my book for having a vocal start out at that dB range. I know that this vocal was recorded in an Atlanta studio, so I don't know what kind of pre-processing took, but vocals sound good raw, ultimately. So add some auto-tune, really set this to however, whatever sounds good for the vocal you're working on. And then I'm gonna go and skip over the auto-tune and go right into this Tube Tech CL1B. This I'm just using to attenuate a couple of dB. Typically it's between 0 and 3. I'm sometimes use the gain knob if I felt like the vocals were too loud to either bring it down a little bit or go up. Looks like I want to bring up the gain after I attenuate a little bit. Just have it more even. I have a pretty fast attack, pretty fast release, and now I'm gonna play it with the auto-tune and this Tube Tech on there.
Excuse me if I'm rambling. I'm mentally exhausted, so I resort to drugs and gambling. Suicidal thoughts, I'm borderline if I can't handle it. Demons in my body, I'm comfortable when I...
So here you can see, if you're looking at the artist bus and the artist, they're not peaking around 12, and it's very even at 12, like very consistent at 12, so that's great. Got a nice good starting line to go into the artist bus. Next, with the artist bus, we have a de-esser. This is just to attenuate when you get those harsh sibilances like tss or aka, go. Maybe not that, actually that is that, but it attenuates some stuff, and that's great. So that's what we want, exactly what we want. Next we have an EQ. With the EQ, just boosting a little bit of high end that I heard at the time. I'm not gonna tell you like a rhyme or reason, it's just you hear things and you might wanna do that or you might not want to, and that's what it is. You have a formula and you kind of deviate from that formula a little bit in terms of what sounds good based on the artist or the vocal or you know, other things or reasons, but you just work on what sounds good. But I have a Pro Q3. This can be typical, kind of roll off the low end, do some of this. It's dynamic cutting off. Basically what I'm doing here is I am cutting off some of the low end, just doing a very slight dip. It's really nothing, like that is nothing. It's hard to explain looking back on mixes, but I just did it because it sounded good at the time, so this is what is happening.
Excuse me if I'm rambling. I'm mentally exhausted, so I resort to drugs and gambling. Suicidal thoughts, I'm borderline if I can't handle it. Demons in my body, I'm comfortable when I channel it. I know it's wrong, like plenty other shit I...
So there we go, there's a vocal. As you can see when I was playing it,
It was wrong, but I still go along. You
this
ever had
part
your dreams slip out your hands, but you still holding on?
It was already pretty rolled off from the studio, so I didn't really have to do a whole lot in terms of my EQ. It's a pretty simple, like it already sounded pretty good, so don't have to do a crazy amount, you know? Sometimes you can just be simple, and that's all that matters. I love the CLA2A compressor. I use it all the time. This, I'm typically looking for anywhere between like 0 to -5, just to really attenuate that vocal, make it super consistent. And I'll use the gain knob, plus or minus, if I feel like I want to turn up or down the vocal at this point in time.
Feel like I don't laugh enough. Excuse me if I'm rambling. I'm mentally exhausted, so I resort to drugs and gambling. Suicidal thoughts, I'm borderline if I can't handle it.
So as you can see, it's hitting over here at the artist between 10 and -8 dB, so that's good. And you can see it was consistently attenuating about 0 to -5 dB with the CLA2A. So just making the vocal more upfront, present, and allowing for it to just be very consistent in terms of loudness. Next to the C4, Oh, don't commit this. Hold up. Next to the C4, I'm going to play it.
Excuse me if I'm rambling. I'm mentally exhausted, so I resort to drugs and gambling. Suicidal thoughts, I'm borderline if I can't handle it. Demons in my body, I'm comfortable when I channel it. I know it's wrong, like plenty other shit I knew was wrong.
So it's not doing a crazy amount. It's just doing very small amounts of attenuation here and there, just when it needs it, just to have more control on the vocal, so that way it's more even all the way across the board. As you can see over like the artist area, if I play this again.
Excuse me if I'm rambling. I'm mentally exhausted, so I resort to drugs and gambling. Suicidal thoughts, I'm borderline if I can't handle it.
It's never going over that 10, so that's good. It's very controlled, nice controlled vocal, and just doing little bit with each plugin, I find really helps. You're not overdoing it with one. You're just really letting it even out. But anyway, going into this next plugin, Air EQ, it looks like I really didn't do a whole crazy amount. Yeah, 1.13 in dB. I really like that high-end range. I really like it with Coop's vocal. I really like to make sure it sounds good and it's really present in the upper end. I did another roll-off just in case the compressors bring up some, make that lower end louder. So got another roll-off here. Did a cut around this 500 hertz frequency range. And I'll just play it again.
Excuse me if I'm rambling. I'm mentally exhausted, so I resort to drugs and gambling. Suicidal thoughts, I'm borderline if I can't handle it. Demons in my body, I'm comfortable when I channel it. I know it's wrong, like plenty others.
And it's still right around -10. Next, we're going to go into this SSL comp, and I'll go and play this.
Excuse me if I'm rambling. I'm mentally exhausted, so I resort to drugs and gambling. Suicidal thoughts, I'm borderline if I can't handle it. Demons in my body, I'm comfortable when I channel it. I know it's wrong, like plenty other shit I knew was wrong, but I still go along.
So all this is doing very, very minor reduction. As you can see over here, it went from 0 to 12. I didn't turn up the makeup gain at all. Quick attack, a little bit of slower release, ratio to 4, just to control those vocals a little bit more, like what the SSL comp sounds like on vocals. So it's not doing a lot, but it did add a little bit. Regarding Saturn II, this is just to get some distortion in the upper form, like the upper frequencies. I did not do the lower frequencies, just the top ones. So I'm gonna play it like this.
Excuse me if I'm rambling. I'm mentally exhausted, so I resort to drugs and gambling. Suicidal thoughts, I'm borderline if I can't handle it. Demons in my body, I'm comfortable when I channel it. I know it's wrong, like plenty other shit I knew was wrong, but I still go along. You ever had your dreams slip out your hands, but you still holding on? Knew I could be the greatest since the first time.
So just adding like a little bit of distortion, or saturation. My bad, not distortion, saturation, but it does, a lot of time it does sound like a little bit of distortion. It just makes it a little bit more grittier, a little bit more present. It gives the vocal a little bit more body. Next, I went with an L2, and this is, I'll go and play it.
I'm mentally exhausted, so I resort to drugs and gambling. Suicidal thoughts, I'm borderline if I can't handle it. Demons in my body, I'm comfortable when I channel it. I know it's wrong, like plenty other shit I knew was wrong, but I still go along.
This was just to bring up the vocal. Typically, I'll use this at the end, like an L2, just to bring up everything as I'm leveling, like the lead vox with the music, with all the instruments, all the drums, and so forth and so on. I just realized that I had the limiters and everything on there this whole time, like the master compressors, so that's a oopsie for this video a little bit, but I'll show you what they sound like at the end without those on. So now, parallel compressor, we have a CLA76, maxed out output is there, and then an L1 limiter, just make sure it doesn't ever peak over like a certain dB range. I'll turn this up and down. Usually 8.7 is pretty solid though. Like good starting point, I'll go up and down, but I usually mix a lot of the times the same, with different deviations, so I'm able to keep a lot of the same settings essentially, and they end up working.
Excuse me if I'm rambling. I'm mentally exhausted, so I resort to drugs and gambling. Suicidal thoughts, I'm borderline if I can't handle it. Demons in my body, I'm comfortable when I channel it. I know
it just adds a little bit more presence to the vocal with the parallel compressor. Now we are going to have the reverb and everything like that. So I'll go and turn everything on. Half delay, fourth delay, eighth delay. I'll go ahead and open up this folder here. Pretty simple stuff. You have reverbs, different rates. You have the reverbs essentially just cutting off all the low end. Delays, just depending on what delay pattern you have. And then for this top end, it's just making, it's like a flanger effect that's really subtle. Our vox compressor on there that I pretty much never ever touch. And then other than that, I'll go and close that folder back. Now we can play it with everything on there.
Excuse me if I'm rambling. I'm mentally exhausted, so I resort to drugs and gambling. Suicidal thoughts, I'm borderline if I can't handle it. Demons in my body, I'm comfortable when I channel it. I know it's wrong, like plenty other
Cool. Now I'm going to play it with the mastering everything off of it, just to hear it before it got mastered.
if I can't handle it. Demons in my body, I'm comfortable when I channel it. I know it's wrong, like plenty other shit I knew was wrong, but I still go along. You ever had your dreams slip out your hands, but you still holding on? Knew I could be the greatest since the first time that I wrote.
So as you can see, when it comes to effects, it's really just whatever I feel like sounds good. I probably went a little bit overboard with reverb on this, but who cares? You know, at the same time, yeah, I can always fix it later. Or in this whole video was just practice to show that, you know, you can make something underneath an hour, and it's just a good challenge. Regarding all my vocal levels, because this is what I really wanted to know when I was first starting out, like where do I place my levels in terms of vocals?
Excuse me if I'm rambling. I'm mentally exhausted, so I resort to drugs and gambling. Suicidal thoughts, I'm borderline.
Usually I'll be around like -8 dB, and I have that because most of the time I'll have my claps or snares also around -8 dB. Then I'll also have like my 808s or kicks at like 6 to 4. My other instruments, it really just depends, and you know, this could be plus or minus, just depends on the song to song. And a lot of people do not like to mix in terms of looking at the faders or how loud an element is, but in terms of consistency, it's what I feel like has helped me be the most consistent with my mixes, mix after mix. Looking at the levels instead of hearing, because a big problem with my studio is I don't really have a lot of soundproofing, so I really do rely on looking at these faders and looking at how loud everything is for consistency day after day. But I'm kind of going on a little bit of a ramble. That's essentially it. So big takeaways. It's okay to use the same plugins every single time, and it's okay to have a lot of the same settings, because if it works, and that's all that matters. You can always just tweak them here and there to make your vocal, or depending on the vocal that you're working with, just do it. You can always use different plugins. Who really cares? I like to have vocals. Number 2, I like to have vocals around -8 or so, as you can see in this comment when I'm done. That's just kind of what I shoot for. That's what I know will work in terms of my mixing process, but your mixing process can always be different. As is the video of this title, how I mix vocals. It doesn't have to be how you mix vocals. That's essentially it. Yeah, so just keep going, and that's my quick thought process and why I do what I do. Yeah, bye-bye.